Hello chess friends and welcome to your Out of Chess channel and welcome back to the Computer Rapid Chess Championship in 2022. So we're now in the final stage, and so far one thing is clear. I think Stockfish will make it to the super final, but this other two engines, this other top two engines, Lc0 and the Dragon engine, are battling it out. Who is making to the finals, because the second place of course secures this other place in the super final. So we're following now a beautiful game that I sorted out. It's Stockfish against Lc0 in the so-called Grünfeld defense in the so-called Goglidze attack. This Goglidze attack is really a beautiful sharp line that I played so often. I probably played this opening so often. It's probably the most often opening that I played, not because of its value of this opening, because I've played one particular player on a chess website, and we played I think 1,000 games in the Goglidze attack. He tried basically to prove his point of this opening, and I tried always to beat this Goglidze attack with the white pieces, and I think it's a sharp opening. It's a very cool opening. It comes out of the Grünfeld defense, and I think Grünfeld defense players love to play the Goglidze attack, especially because the position can explode in the center. But there are also of course beautiful ideas for white, how to counterplay these ideas, and it's I think very important here to recognize, because Stockfish always finds this best choices. Stockfish always finds the best opportunities, how to create the spaces, how to create attacking formations and similar stuff. So that's why I think it's a very instructive game for those who have trouble maybe to play the against the Grünfeld defense, but also of course for Grünfeld defense players, because you don't want to make huge mistakes in an early stage of the game. So let's check out now what is the Grünfeld defense, and of course what is then the Goglidze attack. So here Stockfish opened with the move d4. We have knight to f6, c4, and after move g6, of course after moves knight to c3, which would be now the most flexible line that white can play, you can expect maybe the King's Indian defense or immediately the Grünfeld. But here we have the so-called Alekhine variation with the move f3, and I really love to play this line because we're controlling already the square d5. So many times black can still go bishop to g7, then e4, and then after move d6 it becomes again the King's Indian defense, but with the same-ish attack. We would have now the same-ish attack against the King's Indian. So that's why the Grünfeld defense player doesn't want to go into the King's Indians. So that's why many times after move f3 we have now the so-called Goglidze attack with the move d5, and this is now in my opinion even the best way here to proceed, because you have to make something to happen. Maybe you could also try some ideas of c5, but then after d5, e4, you're going more into Benoni structure. So there is not really a good way for black to escape from this normal King's Indian Benoni structure. So that's why with the move d5, at least you're breaking through in the center immediately. And okay, still the main line is of course c takes d5. After knight to d5, e4, and the cool part for white in this particular line after move knight to b6 is that you don't have to play this move knight to c3. You know, when you play something like knight to c3 and maybe bishop to g7, then maybe after f4 knight takes c3, b takes c3, black is getting into the common Grünfeld structure where black is trading off the knights on c3 and then is trying, like in the normal common Grünfeld, to break here the position with the move c5 and then battle again against this weak pawn on d4. So this would be the main strategic goal. So that's why after move e4 and still without playing the move knight to c3, you have I think beautiful choices now, because you play knight to c3 and you don't have to trade off any more than knight. So this is now the good line I think here for white, but still playable of course also for black, because as we said in the beginning, black doesn't want to get into King's Indian or Benoni structures. Now it's a wild game still, with opportunities here for black to create some madness with e5, c5. The position in the center still can be broken, so black still has opportunities to break in the center. So we have bishop to g7, bishop to e3, pretty normal stuff. We have now kingside castling, and now queen to d2. This queen to d2, in my opinion, is really a great flexible move, which allows white now many things. First of all, what white can always do, and it's a risky choice, but the sharpest attackers are trying these ideas all the time basically, is to immediately launch a flank attack g4 h4. It would be a similar attack like in the Yugoslav attack we're playing against the Drag Sicilian. We're trying to play against the Fianchetto, play something like bishop to h6, then bishop takes g7, h4, h5, trade off maybe some things on the h file, include the queen into the h file, then also maybe deliver checkmate with the rook and queen battery on the h file. So this would be the common aggressive method. But with the move queen to d6, black is trying here to protect the dark squares, although there is also this line to play knight to c6. But now with queenside castling, white is basically showing the cards here that white is trying to launch the attack immediately because white castled on opposite side. So it would be now really sharp and brutal game. So of course black in this scenario could break and answer with the move e5, but now after move you see d5, knight to d4 doesn't make sense. You would be broken, I think, with move f4, getting rid of the key defender of the knight. And even if you try some ideas of knight to a5, maybe to control here further the c4 square, I think this is protectable because still with b3 we can control the c4 square, and that's the line that I, as I said, played most of the times online against my opponent. So we played several times this opening, and he tried to prove his point. I think I had good success in this opening lines because in my opinion white has a comfortable game here, especially because of this fast attack h4 h5 and then bishop to h6, and especially because of one fact that black doesn't have defenders around the king. Black doesn't have the knight on f6, which is many times in Fianchetto structures a good defender around the square h7. So that's why I would love, of course, always to play the game here from white's perspective, because I think I have a clear idea how to attack in this position further. And the engine also left, for instance, this position, it gives here already a +1 evaluation for white. So as I said, you can be the judge of this position. My opponent that also became my friend on this chess website. We played, as I said, almost, I think, 1,000 games in the Neo Grünfeld defense. He tried really to prove his point, but in my opinion, this is a much better position for white. So as I said, after move queen to d2, now queen to d6 was played here. Lila C0 is probably trying to continue the pressure on the d file because the whole battle is centered around the square d4. That's now the main target here of blacks. In the continuation, we have now f4, a really aggressive move by the Stockfish engine, and now after rook to d8 we have knight to f3. Here if you try, for instance, the move instead of this move here queen to b4 was played, but even if you try, for instance, something like c5, like in the usual Grünfeld, to break here somehow, then it's not a problem. You get knight to b5. So I don't like, of course, black's position anymore. You get challenged, you play queen to d7, then d takes c5 is still working, even if you trade off knight to d2, and you see now always there is the threat of knight to c7. So that's why be careful when you push some pawns from black's perspective, because the activity of white's pieces is still perfectly fine here. So there's no time now to break immediately. You have to be patient in order to break white's dominant central position, because white has really here a great expansion in the center of the board, but you have to be still patient in order to break it. So here after move knight to f3 we have queen to b4, and this is now a good move, I think, by Lila C0, because we are controlling the c4 square. We want to play knight to c4 after bishop to c4, then queen to c4 prevents, of course, white from castling on the king side. So we have now a3 kicking away the queen, we have queen to b3, and now queen to c1. We have now c6 by Lila C0, and now h3. This was also a very important move, I think, because even if you try something like bishop to e2, then you will probably get this move knight to c4, and you're pretty much forced to take it out because this move h3 also prevents some ideas of bishop to g4. Then after bishop to f3, maybe this d4 pawn could be weakened. So that's why h3, great prophylactic move here by the Stockfish engine. We have now knight to c4, attacking now the bishop on e3. We have bishop to f2, and it's already really a wild and critical position because many things can already happen. For instance, if you try here queen takes b2, that's not good, of course, because you lose the knight on c4. So that's why here after move bishop to f2. Even if you try knight takes b2, again it's not so good because you get rook to b1, and then of course you cannot retreat with the knight, you lose the queen. So that's why the knight will be trapped. So far you cannot attack the b2, you cannot take the pawn on b2 immediately. So that's why here Lc0 tried this aggressive method to try to play c5. Of course, the main problem of white here is that white is far away from castling. We need at least one move, maybe bishop to e2, bishop to d3, and still another move. So at least 2 tempi just in order to secure the king. So that's why Lc0 smells on blood here, since of course that the position could get open, especially with this beautiful bishop activity. Also the rook is very active on the d file, so it's really time to break and open the position. So here after move c5, now knight to d5 again. This idea queen takes b2 is not working because of bishop to c4, so the knight is hanging. So that's why here we have knight takes b2. The problem here for Stockfish is you cannot play the move knight to c7. It seems like a tempting move. I think many of us would play this move knight to c7. I would consider a move for sure. I'm not even sure if I would see that it's not possible to play this move, because after move knight to c7 the game is really unpleasant here for white, because you can simply leave the rook hanging. You can play knight to c6 and play on normal development, because if white takes now and the rook on a8, then you simply lose the battle. Knight takes d4, bishop to d4, bishop to d4. Here even if you try knight to d4, you see a queen to g3 is going to happen. So everything is messed up here for white. So that's why you cannot play this idea knight to c7, so you have to play knight to e7 like here Stockfish did. If you play king to f8, then queen to c5 is going to happen, so you cannot get the king on this side of the board. Now there are really some wild discover attack possibilities here for white, so that's why you have to retreat here to h8 like Lc0 did. And now comes really beautiful move, knight to e5. Knight to e5 is really cool because it threatens some ideas, of course, to play bishop to c4. Then you have to maybe cover or maybe even take with knight to c4, but then knight to f7 would be really beautiful checkmate. So that's why Lc0 gets rid of this very annoying knight in the center of the board. We have bishop to e5, but now after f takes e5 we can notice now that okay, you have solved the one problem, you got rid of this very annoying knight, but you're facing now here from black's perspective many dark square problems, and you gave up the dark square bishop, which is the key protector of dark square. So now we can expect this bishop to come into the game. Also the queen can come on h6, so it's now already a strategically messed up position here for black. So after move f takes e5 we have king to g7, because if you play for instance something like c takes d4, if you take out this pawn in the center of the board, then it's game over. Bishop to h4 is threatening bishop to f6, immediately checkmate. Really wild stuff. You see you can get checkmated with the bishop and the knight on e7. So here queen to c3, you see takes, and now bishop to f6 would be checkmate. So even if you try some ideas of knight to d7, maybe to control further the f6 square, this would be a good defensive move I think here for black. Then bishop to e2 with ideas of bishop to g4, bishop takes d7, and then still bishop to f6. You could maybe try d3, but now bishop to g4, and you see now the knight will be taken, and then bishop to f6 is still a beautiful checkmate, right? So you can play still queen to h6 and similar stuff. The only way maybe to prolong the game is to play something weird like queen d2, but it's still completely losing here for black. So that's why after f takes e5 you cannot take the pawn on d4, you have to play different ideas. So that's why king to g7 is controlling further the h8 square, but it's not good here for black to defend the dark squares only with the king. I think you need more protectors, so that's why we can expect a couple more moves this night at least to control the f6 square. So we have now bishop to e2, we have knight to d3, bishop takes d3, queen to d3, and now queen to h5, trying now to sneak in with the queen here on this weird square on f6. So it's really a messed up position for black, although White's king is also naked, but you cannot create really so many things. Even if you try queen to c3, even if you take the rook, still with this bishop, with the queen here, you get checkmated on g7. So you don't have time to just create checks with the queen. You have to include more pieces into the defense. So that's why knight to c6, trying to attack here this knight. We have queen to f6, king to h6, now queen to h4, a couple perpetuals, but now knight to d5. This move is very important because it prepares now a potential bishop to e3. You see, we couldn't have played the move bishop to e3. We would love, of course, to play this move before, because it creates a very annoying check and probably even a checkmate. But now it's a huge threat because it's the knight is controlling, of course, the e3 square. So that's why we have now c takes d4. Now bishop to e3 is not possible because the pawn is controlling the square. So that's why queen to f4. We have king to g7, and now bishop to h4. Now Stockfish is trying to play bishop to f6. When the king gets on g8 on f8, then queen to h6. So that's why here bishop to e6, Lila C0 is trying to get rid of at least one of these very, very annoying attackers. But now for bishop to f6, we have king to f8, and now rook to d1. Attacking the queen, we have queen to a3. Also very important to notice that this move queen to a3 is controlling further the dark squares, because after castling that Stockfish plays in king to g8, now queen to h6 doesn't make immediately sense, because queen to f8 can still protect the g7 square, and suddenly black would be much better, because especially of these two pass pawns on the queen. So this is now a defendable position here for black. So that's why you have to be careful when you attack these positions. After move king to g8, now comes the stunner of the game. So maybe you can pause the video and try to see the best continuation here in the in the game, because there is always the problem of defenders in when you're on the attacking side. You want to get rid of many defenders. So I think we have to realize that the knight on c6 is also here one of the key defenders in front of black's king, although the knight is a little bit far away from black's king, but still it can be included, of course, into the defense, because it controls the e7 square. So now Stockfish pull off really thick, brutal move, rook takes d4. The problem is now, if you play knight takes d4, then actually this idea is working. This idea queen to h6 is working, because after queen to f8, that protects, of course, the g7. Now the knight comes on e7, and you see now the knight on c6 has had a control of that square. So now the knight is deflected, and actually knight to e7 is a really beautiful checkmate. So you can play queen to e7, but now queen to g7 is again a checkmate. So really important stunner, this move, rook takes d4. Really brutal, sick, privileged tactic by the fish. So here, after move rook to d4, we have queen to f8, we have rook to rook to d2, getting now out of this mess. And now after move h6, you have to control, of course, further the dark squares. Now Stockfish grabs the rook and has now a situation where Stockfish is up the exchange, but still it's unpleasant to play. Maybe if this would be maybe in sort of a FIDE master, international master level, still I think this would be unpleasant to play here, because black can always push the pawns here on the queen side. So still it doesn't matter. Maybe black can hang on to this position, but here after move bishop to d8, we have rook to d8, and now knight to f6, very important, checking to g7, and now rook to d6. We have now a5. Finally black is pushing the pawns on the queen side. We have knight to d5, rook takes d6, we have e takes d6, and now queen to d8, knight to c7, and now queen to f6, and now finally knight takes e6, queen takes e6, queen takes e6, f takes e6. But now it's obvious, okay, in this scenario black has 5 pawns, white has only 4 pawns. But also very important thing to notice, as we said here, white is also a pass pawn. That's now the important thing. If this wouldn't be a pass pawn, maybe here on the f file, then it would be very unpleasant to play, because the knight would support these 2 pawns, black could push them further. So but with this pass pawn on the d file, the knight gets also deflected, also the king is always deflected to this pawn. So it's completely winning endgame here for white. So in the continuation, we have rook to b1, now knight to d8 has to protect the pawn, but now after rook to b5, now it's game over, because one of these pawns will be taken for sure. We had a4, and now rook to a5 attacking, and now finally grabbing this pawn. So this is now completely winning here for white. So we have now e5, rook to a5, we have rook to d5 protecting everything, and now rook to e5 here. Lila c0 also took, but now rook to d5 again as you check, and now of course the king has to play actively in this endgame. g4 g5, now e5 attacking the knight, rook to d8, we had new check, now attacking simply this pawn. And finally this pawn, so you see Stockfish has also this pawn maybe that can be taken, so it's completely winning. As I said, nothing can be done here anymore for black. E to d7, e6, we had rook to d6, again a new check, pushing the pawn further, rook takes d6 promotion, and now it was a checkmate after queen to a8. So really brutal moves here by the Stockfish engine. I really loved this move. Let's go back. This rook takes so after bishop to f6, so this was in my opinion really a brilliant move. Rook takes d4, deflecting the knight from the defense, and it was so important to take out this pawn, because if you could just imagine, if white would not have taken this pawn, then this pass pawn on the d file could cause many strategical and tactical problems in the endgame. But it was a huge important thing. Afterwards we had this situation where Stockfish took the rook, had the situation up the exchange, and had now a completely winning game and also comfortable position. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed the game. I really enjoyed it a lot. Interesting ideas of the Neo Grünfeld defense. If you want to see more brutal attacks like this, check out my coverage. So far we had almost 300 games of our computer chess series. Check them out. They're really brilliant, these games that the top engines like Stockfish, Lc0, Alpha0 are playing. Here's the link of our playlist, and if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.